Her husband chased her away for feeding a homeless beggar sitting at their gate. They made a shocking discovery. It was just one plate of rice, one bar soap, one sachet of pure water, one wrapper, and one act of kindness. That's what shattered her marriage of many years. But they did not know she just awakened a forgotten king. When Esther knelt by a dusty stranger at her husband's gate in the estate, she had no idea she was feeding a man the world had buried. A man who would later return, but not in rags. Her husband laughed at her, shamed her, threw her out like trash. But the beggar she helped, he came back in a black G-Wagon, looking for one woman, Esther. This is not just a story. This is a miracle with a memory. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave your heart racing and your eyes wide. Welcome to Beggar African Folktales. Please don't scroll past without hitting the like button. Also comment what you think. The sun was hatched that afternoon. The dust from passing cars floated through the air like tiny ghosts. It was a quiet estate, gated, fenced, and proud. The kind of place where every compound looks the same, and people liked it that way. But on this particular day, something looked different. Outside one of the tall black gates inside this popular estate sat a man. He was barefoot, skinny, his clothes hanging from his bones like rocks. His hair was thick and matted into dreadlocks. His eyes, though tired and sunken, still searched, not for trouble, just for mercy. Most people who passed saw only what they feared. Some turned their faces away. Mothers pulled their children close. One woman hissed loudly, "This estate is finished. Look at who we now have at the gate." But not Esther. Esther was different. She was soft-spoken in her early 30s and always wore a calm look on her face like a quiet river. Her wrapper was plain, her slippers old, but her heart was open. She saw the man and stopped. He didn't speak, he couldn't, but his stomach spoke for him, very loud, empty groans that twisted her heart. And Esther leaned forward. "Sir, have you eaten today?" The man tried to respond, but only his lips moved, no words came. She turned and walked quickly into the compound. Inside, her husband Ebuka sat on a leather couch, his phone in one hand, a glass of juice in the other. He was tall, confident, and successful in the world's eyes. He had no time for stories that didn't bring money. "There is a man outside," Esther said. "Hungry, I'll give him some rice." Ebuka didn't even look up. "That man? Esther, those are the kind of people that cause families. Oh, let him go." But Esther was already in the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with a plate of rice and a bottle of water. She went outside, walked past the judging eyes, and knelt before the beggar. He took the food slowly, like he wasn't sure it was real. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice dry like wind passing through leaves. And for the first time in a long time, a flicker of light returned to his eyes. The next day, Esther went to the market. She used what little housekeeping money was left. She bought a wrapper, a pair of slippers, soap, and a towel. That was all she could afford. When she came back, she walked straight to the gate. The man was still there, sitting weak, unsure of where he belonged. "Take this," she said, handing him the plastic bag. "Use the soap. Cover yourself. Mosquitoes are many around here." He blinked, almost in disbelief. She helped him to the side tap in their compound, helped him wash, wrapped the fresh wrapper around him with care. Now he looked different, but still fragile, still quiet, but no longer invisible. When Ebuka returned that evening and saw the man, a cleaner, sitting up straighter, sipping water from a cup, his anger exploded. "Esther, are you mad? You are using my money to dress a beggar like a king." Esther, standing by the doorway, answered calmly, "He's not mad, he's just broken." That only made things worse. Ebuka stroked the bag out of her hands. Soap and towels scattered across the ties like falling pride. "So this is what I work for. So the world can laugh at me. My wife, friend of beggars." That night, Esther knelt beside her bed, hands shaking. She prayed not loudly, but with all her heart. "God, whatever story this man carries, heal him. Give him another chance." And what she didn't know was that the man had heard her. From the gate, and in that silence, a single tear rolled down his cheek. The morning came quiet and golden. The man was still outside, clean, sitting silently under a tree. He didn't beg. He didn't ask. He just watched the birds and the sky. The neighbors whispered again, "Is that not the same man from before? See how clean he looks. Is it the same person?" Something had shifted. They saw it, but Ebuka didn't care. His pride was boiling. "Why is he still here? Is this your project now, Esther? Or maybe he is your old lover from the past?" These last words hit her like stones. Esther's mouth opened in shock, but no sound came. Ebuka laughed coldly, his voice rising. "Since you love him so much, go and live with him. Be the queen of beggars." He stormed inside, grabbed her bags, and threw them at the gates. "Out! Leave this house! Go and be with your precious madman." Esther stood still for a moment, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't scream. She didn't argue. She begged. She knelt, begged more and more. But instead of accepting her, her husband got angrier and kicked her hard. Esther picked up her things slowly, folded her dignity, and walked out the gate. She did not look back. When Esther walked away from Ebuka's house with nothing but her small handbag and a wrapper tied tightly around her waist, she felt like the ground beneath her had vanished. She didn't know where she was going. Her legs moved faster than her thought. Her feet hit the dusty road, one step at a time, but her heart felt heavier with each step. Heavy with shame, heavy with confusion, heavy with a kind of sadness that she had never known before. Why did Ebuka change so much? Why did being kind suddenly feel like doing something wrong? It was already getting dark when she arrived at Christ Mercy Sanctuary, a quiet church compound not far from the edge of town. She had volunteered there sometimes in the past, helping with the women's group, sorting clothes for donation, or singing softly during prayers. The moment she stepped into the church gates, Mama Ngozi, the pastor's wife, looked up from where she was watering the flowers. Her eyes widened and she dropped the watering can. She ran to Esther and wrapped her arms around her without asking a single question. Esther didn't need to explain. Her swollen eyes and battered face, tired shoulders, and dusty legs said everything. "Come in, my daughter," Mama Ngozi whispered, holding her close. "You will sleep here tonight." That night, Esther lay on a same mattress in the women's quarters. Two other women, mothers, snored softly beside her. The low hum of worship songs drifted from the prayer room nearby, but Esther couldn't sleep. She turned her face into the pillow and cried quietly. The tears weren't just because of her husband. They were also for the man at the gate, the beggar, the one who had said barely a word but had stirred something deep in her heart. Where is he now? Did he find food? Is he safe from the cold? She prayed softly, her voice trembling. "God, if this is a test, give me the strength to pass it, and please protect that man. I felt something in him, something deep. Please don't let him be lost again." The next morning, Mama Ngozi gave Esther small work in the church clinic. She helped with cleaning the rooms, arranging files, and sometimes taking blood pressure for elderly patients. She wore simple clothes, kept her head down, and did everything quietly without complaints. Days passed, then weeks, months. The man never came back. She kept checking the estate gate from a distance, hoping to see that familiar figure. Even though he never spoke much, he had become something like a small light in a very dark moment of her life. And now even that light was gone. Why did he disappear? Back in the heritage estate, Ebuka was also noticing the silence. He tried to act normal, but he still shouted at the gatekeeper sometimes, still scrolled his phone endlessly. But Esther had known him too well. She could have told from the way he stood by the balcony in the evenings, always looking towards the gate. He missed her. And something else too. One hot Tuesday afternoon, something unusual happened. A loud engine roared outside the estate. People turned their heads, curtains shifted, necks stretched. A black G-Wagon, shining, massive, proud, glided into estate like a king returning to his castle. He stopped at the chairman Onyedika's compound, the estate chairman who loved hosting parties and gossiping with power. Balloons hung at his gate. A band was playing already. Out of the G-Wagon stepped a tall man, dark skin, clean shaven, strong jawline. His outfit was designer. His watch glinted like starlight. His shoes were sharp and silent. Ebuka leaned forward from his balcony, curious. He narrowed his eye. Who is this man? Who is this one again? Then the man turned slightly. Their eyes met just for a second. Ebuka's body tensed. His stomach flipped. That face. It couldn't be. It's him, the beggar. But now he looked like a prince. No, a king. Ebuka grabbed his slippers and followed quietly. He stayed hidden behind a car outside the chairman's compound and watched. Inside, people clapped and hugged the man. Laughter, drinks, loud music. Then someone handed the microphone to the estate chairman. "Ladies and gentlemen," chairman said, grinding white, "please welcome David Uche, head to Uche Motors." The whole crowd gasped. Phones light up. Video started rolling. Ebuka held onto a wall. He felt like the ground was slipping away. The chairman kept speaking.
"Presumed dead 7 years ago during a robbery attack, but today he returned fully restored. Praise the God."
David stepped forward. He looked calm. His voice carried peace. "Yes, I was kidnapped, left for dead in forest. I lost everything, even my memory. I walked like a madman. I slept under trees. I begged. I forgot who I was." The crowd stood still. "3 weeks ago, something changed. I began to remember. A name, a face, a voice, bit by bit. My story came back." He paused, looked up at the sky, then at the crowd. "But there is one thing I remember very clearly. A woman." Everyone felt quiet. "When I was nothing, dirty, hungry, almost forgotten, she gave me food. She gave me water. She gave me soap to wash. She gave me a wrapper to cover against mosquito. She even washed me, and she even knelt beside me. She didn't ask who I was. She just gave. That woman saved me." Ebuka stood frozen. David's voice grew stronger. "I don't know her name, but wherever she is, I will find her. I must. Because she gave me something money can't buy, dignity." The next morning, the whole country knew. David Uche's face was everywhere. Newspapers, TV, blogs, billboard. "Lost hair returned. 6 women who saved him." Under the headline, "To the woman who gave me food and a wrapper outside Heritage Estate, I will find you and I will change your life." Social media went wild. Some women came forward pretending to be Esther, but David wasn't fooled. He said he would recognize her face, her voice, her spirit. Meanwhile, Ebuka couldn't sleep anymore. He lay in the silence of his house, staring at the ceiling, hearing only his regret. Finally, one night, he drove to Christ Mercy Sanctuary. He walked into the clinic where Esther was arranging medicine bottles on a shelf. She didn't look up. He looked smaller, softer. His voice was cracked. "Esther," he whispered, "I made a mistake, a big one." She didn't answer, so he did something she never expected. He knelt down on the dusty floor in front of the nurses, in front of the same woman he once called spiritually foolish and beaten up. "Please come home." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were gentle but far away. "You are not my enemy, Ebuka," she said, "or you are not my home anymore either." And in that quiet moment, he understood. News of David Uche's search filled the country like fire in a dry grass. He wasn't just asking quietly. He made sure the world heard. Newspapers, radio stations, televisions, even social media were full of his message. Full-page advert. "To the woman who gave me water, food, and dignity, I am looking for you. You saved my life. Now let me change yours." People cry when they hear his voice on radio. His words touch something deep, something human. The world called it the search for the angel of mercy. But Esther didn't know any of this. She was busy pouring tea for an old woman at the church clinic when Ebuka walked in. He looked tired. His eyes were sunken. He held his cap in his hand, twisting it slowly. When he saw Esther, still calm, still serving, still gentle, he dropped to his knees right there on the clinic floor. Esther, I threw you away. I mocked you. I forgot who you were. His voice cracked, his shoulders shook. Please come home. Please. Esther stood still. Her eyes filled with tears this time, but not of anger, but of memory, of pain, of the little girl in her who used to dream of happy endings. But her heart wasn't sure. And then the church door opened. A car had pulled up outside. A few people rushed to the windows, whispering. A tall man stepped in, wearing simple white shirt and dark trousers. David Iche. When he saw Esther, he spoke like time itself had paused. For a full minute, he didn't speak. Then he walked slowly towards her, his steps heavy with emotion. When he reached her, he knelt, again not in shame, but in reverence. It is you, he said, voice shaking. You are the woman from the gate. I will never forget your face. Esther gasped. You gave me water when I was thirsty. You gave me clothes when I was naked. You gave me my name back when I had forgotten it. You didn't just save my life, you gave me back my humanity. Now, whatever you want, wherever you want to go, name it, it is yours. But Esther couldn't speak. Behind the curtain, Ebuka stood like a ghost, his eyes wide, his pride crushed into dust. Esther, she did not cry because of the riches offered to her. She cried because of the power of kindness, because the small act of giving, done without expecting anything in return, had brought to her this moment. Later that week, Esther sat under the mango tree beside the church, her hand resting on her lap. Ebuka came again, this time quietly. He sat on the ground, a few feet away from her. He didn't beg this time. He didn't explain. He just looked at her, waiting. She turned to him. I forgive you, Ebuka, she said softly. I don't hate you, but love without respect is a prison, and I've lived in that prison for too long. I found peace here. I found purpose, and I'm not going back with you. Ebuka nodded. A single tear slipped down his cheek. He understood. That same week, David made an announcement. He bought land beside the church and began building something extraordinary. A bright white structure with wide doors and soft blue curtains. When it was completed, a golden ribbon was tied across the gate. Cameras came. Journalists stood outside. The sign on the wall read, The Esther Touch Foundation, a healing home. It was a clinic for the poor, the sick, the forgotten. David appointed Esther as its director. She now wore a name tag, carried a clipboard, and smiled at children running through the hallway. She gave medicine with laughter and hope with every bandage. The woman who was once mocked for giving to a beggar now gave healing to hundreds. People came from all over the estate, from all over the state to see the woman who gave a king water. She became a symbol of quiet power, of what it means to give without expecting anything back. On the plaque of the building, And on the wall next to the reception desk hangs a golden plaque. It reads, "She gave a beggar food and gained a kingdom." Moral of the story: sometimes when you offer the world your heart, it returns the favor with a crown. Thank you for listening to the end. If you like this story, like it and comment. Thank you and bye.